Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Red Key Club Day. This is Vivian Kramer, one of my absolute favoriteest people in the entire world, and I'm so excited that you are joining us, Vivian. Thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure, but I need to be your most favorite, not just one of your most favorites.
Okay, all right, nope, done. Absolute most favorite, top of the list.
Well, let me know how to work on it, and I will work on it. So.
Oh, you. Okay, so, and then can everybody else see us and hear us? Hi, Kim, Faye, Jaguar, Jen, Claire. Eva, awesome. Yes, great, Sin. Hello, Lucy. Fantastic. Okay, good. So welcome back to all of our long-term Red Key members, like those of you who have been around already for the last couple of months, and welcome to all of you new folks who are just joining us. This is the first in the guest expert series that I'm organizing for the Red Key Club, because even though I have a vast amount of knowledge to share, I also have vast gaps in that knowledge. No vast, just a little bit of knowledge. And so I am bringing in smart folks like Vivian to help. And so a couple of things that I want to start with, and then we'll jump in. Okay. So this first session is, first of all, these are discussions. These are not really as structured as the classes that I normally do, right? Normally I come in, all content, flaming and ready to go. And this one's going to be quite a bit more organic. Vivian and I have some general topics that we're going to go over. But of course, as always, if you have questions as we're going, feel free to pop them in the chat box and I'll bring them in as we can. Now, legal disclaimers. Vivian is not an accountant. She is not your accountant. She's not your lawyer. None of this is legally binding or like, being offered as the end all be all advice. You are 100% encouraged and required to do your own research about how the things we're going to talk about today are relevant or different in the state or country that you might live. And so this is a discussion that's going to cover as much as we can, but is not intended to either A, cover everything, or B, be any sort of legal or binding advice. Okay. And so what this is a discussion with a knowledgeable and open-minded person, that's you, Vivian, who's going to answer questions to the best of her exceptionally high ability. Okay. So does that sound good? Everybody on board with kind of what the intention of this is? Yes, Vivian?
So let me just throw in again. So my history is in 30 plus years of nonprofit management. I've been doing budgets for my friends since I was 10 years old. And I am the first person to say, I don't know, or you really need to check. So I will not at all put out there that I know everything. I've been, consulting and working with people for a really long time. And so that's why I was excited to talk to all of you with my dear friend, Callie. In terms of the kink community, I was very active in the Boston area and on the national scene with the National Coalition for Sexual Freedom, the New England Leather Alliance, and currently CARIS, which I forget what that stands for, but it's also kink related. So
I can never remember what CARIS stands for. You've got to work on that acronym.
I know. Community, alternative, sexuality, science, something, but it's kink, poly, swing, the usual.
Yeah.
The good stuff.
Yeah. Vivian has been actively involved in the behind the scenes, basically in all of the most major national organizations when it comes to how kink is experienced and perceived. Vivian has had a hand in all of those boards, both in shaping the boards themselves and then specifically in the financial arena. And so, so thank you for reminding us of all of your awesome qualifications, Vivian. And then I'm going to share just a little bit about my journey with my finances, just so that, you know, we can set the tone of conversation here, and especially for those of you who have participated in my Q&As and other classes too. These are very real conversations, and so you don't have to be like embarrassed if you don't know something. In fact, that's specifically why I'm going to start with how royally I have fucked up my money management in the past, because I think that whenever presenters, teachers, you know, folks who are trying to share their experience, share the fuck ups, then there's a lot to gain from those as well. And when I say fuck up, I'm both talking about actual choices that I did or didn't proactively make, and then also things that I didn't have control over. So first of all, I have dyscalculia, which is dyslexia with numbers. And so basically more than 2, maybe 3 numbers, and my mind starts getting really overwhelmed, and it starts looking like, you know, ancient Greek to me. Like, it just is overwhelming. It doesn't make any sense. And now over the years, I've developed a really intense panic response to all of these experiences, right? Math, I almost failed. I did fail out of math multiple times, and finally they just passed me because they were like, Jesus Christ, just get on with your life. And, you know, you'll have a calculator. And so, like, I used to really screw up my, you know, my math classes, which then felt overwhelming. And it's just like this snowball thing where if you don't get a foundational understanding, it's so hard to circle back around and feel confident and comfortable with these things, right? And so I have spent a lifetime having like crippling panic attacks in response to trying to manage my money. And so in response, then I just didn't manage my money. I've always loved making money. You know, we all know that there is great money to be made in the sex industry, but I wouldn't do a very good job of keeping track of it because the numbers were so slippery to me. And because there was a 2-part thing here, and I'm very curious as whether or not how many other sex workers have experienced this as well. So please feel free to drop your comment in the chat box. But what happened was that my relationship to money has become almost unreal. That because my mind struggles to grasp the numbers of it, and then because I would make $300 for spitting on a dude, or money would just literally show up in my post office box, like an envelope of money would just show up from some admirer, right? My sense of money management has just never actually been based in reality. And so it took me a very long time to not only reconcile my fear and my panic about numbers, but the idea that money actually does tangibly mean something other than I want it, someone give it to me, which was a big part of my pro-dom philosophy, right? And so I had very much a see it in my bank account, spend it in my life sort of philosophy. And then because of all of these things, I didn't actually file my taxes for many years, not quite a decade, many years, because I got some really bad advice at the very start, and I set up the wrong business structures. And then I had 3 business structures. So I had 3 businesses and my own taxes, none of which I was filing. Not because the money wasn't there or whatever, it's just because I didn't know how to manage it. And so finally, a couple of years ago, I hired a phenomenal mainstream accountant. I've paid her a substantial amount of money, but she has untangled my taxes and my finances for the first time in a decade, where I actually, like, I got that $1,200 whatever fund, stimulus fund or whatever, in like the first 2 weeks. And I thought, oh, are they really going to send them to dirty perverts like me? Like, I didn't even really think I'd get one, but because I had filed finally on time, it did. And so now, even though I still have dyscalculia, I still have a lot of anxiety, I now have set up systems, and I understand what is it that I need to manage, and then what is it that I need to get help with. So that's the lengthy nutshell edition of my financial journey, that now I'm in a place where I don't have panic attacks thinking about it. I've done things such as, because spreadsheets overwhelm me, and so just these, we're going to talk about some different systems. Like I bought an actual analog journal that I go through and have been writing my stuff in, to just give me a visual, visceral, physical system, right? And so I finally have a system now that feels like it's solid and that it's getting stronger. And so that's my journey, to just let you know that like neither Vivian or I are here sitting in like judgment of stuff that you don't understand, that you haven't done, or that you may have kind of proactively screwed up, like not filing taxes in my case. Okay, so that's kind of my first, so those are our little first intros here. Let me just check this right. Oh my God, Faye, monopoly money, like that is such a problem for sex workers.
So let me jump in just for a little bit. So, teaching money in school, teaching basic budgeting, I mean, it doesn't happen. I've recently sort of gotten re-engaged with Girl Scouts, and the Girl Scouts are actually, now you get a badge for money management. And, some schools are starting to teach it, but most still don't. And it's ridiculous, because how are you expected to go out in the world and not know how, what money means? I got a comment though, that stimulus check, Callie, that's, everyone thinks that's bonus money. That's your own money.
Oh, no, it's not. Yeah, I don't think it's bonus money. That is my money.
It is your money. But so many people, I mean, the way our stupid president talks about it, it's like, oh, we're going to give you this money. This is just our own taxes. This is our own money we're getting an advance on. Yeah. So again, as I said, I'm not going to read the, you're going to follow the chat and the questions, but I guess one of the first things I was hoping we could sort of talk about and just maybe discuss a little bit is, what are people afraid of? What is upsetting? And is there are there a few minutes we can spend talking about how to sort of disconnect fear and dollars? So I don't know.
Great. That's an absolutely fantastic framing, and I think is a really good place to start, right? Because we have to start, I talk all the time about how in my classes about starting with stereotypes, right? Starting with misconceptions. And so let's talk about what are the fears that you guys have. Now again, you might have big fears, like how are you ever going to buy a house? Those kinds of things. They might be kind of smaller, more daily fears, like how do I keep track of money coming in and coming out? How do I stop myself from spending? Those kinds of things. But what are the things around money that you guys are afraid of, struggling with? And some of those we might address today, and some of them we might hold off on for future discussions. Okay, so that Red Plastic is saying that that monopoly money was your mindset, but that you switched over to like kind of calculating your finances. Ophelia is talking about being good at keeping records, but that since the pandemic that you've stopped because they all feel like gifts as opposed to earn money. Ooh, let's definitely make a note of talking about the mindset around gifts and money and how you might need to differentiate those things in the future, right? And so even though it was in exchange for calls or texts. So Ophelia, so you're not keeping track of those things anymore. So kind of like how to get back into the habit of things. Sasha, that you would, when you would be shopping, you'd be thinking in hours instead of dollars. Yeah, I'm totally still that same way. Okay, so Jen says, how to keep track of money for business purposes. Excellent. That's something straightforward that we're definitely going to talk about.
Well, I was going to say, let's just jump in to a couple of those things, because we can be pretty specific. I mean, I'm not hearing sort of any, and we can.
We're just starting, though.
Yeah, I was going to say we can keep this thread alive throughout the whole discussion and through future conversations. This again, the fear of money, the psychological barrier. It all starts with, you have to write it down. I mean, there's no mystery or magic to keeping track of expenses. You just have to write them down. You have to realize that when you're spending it, you need to write it down. That's the first step. You've got to, first is, it's just like with an addiction, right? First, you have to admit you have a problem. You have a problem with money, or you have a problem with numbers. Accept it, figure out how to deal with it, which again, we'll talk more, but the first step is just writing it down. You've got to make a commitment to just every time you spend, write it down for at least the first couple of weeks. Once you get in the swing of things, you'll be able to back off, but start writing it down, get into the habit.
But actually, I want to say, I don't personally think a few weeks is enough.
It's not, but I didn't want to overwhelm.
Yeah. No, I get what you're saying, but like that, and that for me, one of the biggest things was that finding a system that works for you. When I showed a couple of both business friends and regular friends my little workbook here, they were like, no. All you need to do is get a spreadsheet, and just every month, like, you just put them in a spreadsheet. And I thought, you don't understand how my brain works. That is not helpful to me. To other people, the thought of writing things down is a nightmare. For me, I love using colored pens and having a visual, right? I saw Lucy mention Mint, the app Mint. I also use Mint, and I have to kind of go in and force myself to take a look at it, right? And so what Vivian is saying is totally true. The irrefutable fact is that you have to track it. The adaptable aspect of that fact is how you track it, right?
Absolutely. Again, you have to recognize that you have a problem and you have to figure out what's the best way that your mind will let you deal with it. I love Callie's system of colored pencils and paper. And if that, if writing it down feels good to you, if you don't mind using Excel or are interested in learning a couple of easy things on an Excel sheet. Again, sometimes these words sound a lot bigger than they are. Accounting, QuickBooks, all of the steps.
They sound unknowable.
Yeah, they sound right. So every industry makes itself sound like it's really important and really, really critical to life. It's just writing numbers down. And in Excel, learning how to do 3 or 4 formulas of adding up stuff or subtracting stuff, I guarantee you, if you can use a smartphone, which I can't, you can use Excel to fix your situation.
It's true. She has a flip phone. It's honestly one of the cutest things that I've ever seen in my life. Do you have it right there? Yeah. This woman still uses a flip phone. So, use the technology that works for you is the moral of this story, right? And so, whether it's Excel, whether it's QuickBooks, there's a couple of comments here that QuickBooks self-employed app is good, that Mint app is good. You want to do a colored pen and binder set. If you're old school like me, then that's good. The point is that you start tracking. Mm-hmm. And that's going to give you an understanding of your money that you may not be getting if it's coming in and out, especially in big chunks, right? Is that it's like, it may look like you're making a ton of money because you get $1,000 payouts from Night Flirt, or you booked an extended session back when we were allowed to have human contact, right? But then if you're not tracking the costs going out, then it's all kind of vague. And that was a really big thing for me, was just finding a system and working with it. So now let's talk a little bit, and I'm keeping track of all of these other questions that are coming up in the chat books, but I want to talk then about what do you track, right?
So, and that's where I was going to jump into, Callie. So here's the thing, I've been counting calories all my life. So it's, at this point, I just sort of do it mentally. It's for at least a short, and I start off with a couple weeks. I agree. It usually has to go longer, but like I said, I don't want to overwhelm folks. At least for, let's call it a month. you've got to write down everything. And that's and under the pandemic, we're all sort of leading different lives, but I mean, that's every Starbucks visit, that's every CVS, every Walgreens, every, streaming service you have, every, power bill, every, phone, every, box of condoms, every, wax.
Literally,
yeah, everything. And even, whether you're spending cash or you're using your credit card, write it down. And again, everybody's different in terms of how they deal with, their issues. But for me, I find that if I know I have to do something for a period of time and then I might be able to have to, get to stop doing it, then I can sort of say, okay, I'm only doing this for a month, or I'm only doing this for a day, or I'm only doing this for a year.
Yeah.
So just tell yourself you're not going to have to do this forever, especially if, this is a big, anxiety producing exercise, but write everything down.
And another quick note about that. So I get really screwed up by decibel points. And so I like $12.97 might as well just be $13 to me. And so one of the big things about me transitioning into keeping track of things was rounding everything.
Mm-hmm.
Is that because the more decibels, the more numbers there were, right? And the more options for confusion for my actual learning disability.
Mm-hmm.
And so that for me, the first couple of months that I started tracking things, I just rounded up or rounded down and believed that it was A, close enough, and B, would kind of all even out in the end, right? And so that it's not about the pennies, it's about the habit and the overview. And then you can start to refine that as you go, right?
Absolutely. And you're right. It's the habit, it's the consistency. And also, just in case, again, because there's no judgment and there's no assumptions here. So rounding up and rounding down. So that means anything over 50 cents, you're rounding up, and anything under 50 cents, so 49 cents and less, is you're rounding down. Just so we're, no assumptions.
Yeah, right, exactly. So, and then let's see here. A couple of things I want to mention from the chat box. Ava mentioned that is an excellent thing to keep in mind is that anything that is digital is trackable. That we all know how tech companies do not respect privacy, do not respect, opting in and consent and those kinds of things. And so if it is a concern for you, that there might be a digital trail of that information, then go old school and get yourself a binder. Because while I can't think of any reason that I might want to, I could chuck this baby in a shredder. I could throw it in a fireplace. I mean, my life isn't that exciting, but if I needed to, it's something that isn't going to be accessible. And as someone whose server was just hacked, this isn't accessible to anyone unless they break into my house, right? And so I think that Eva, that's a good point. And then there's been a couple of mentions of comments about, again, like what do you keep track of? So I know, Vivian, that you're saying everything. But one of the helpful things for me to do has been to categorize things, right? Is that that's something that your accountant will usually do if you have somebody, or that you do when it comes to tax time. Just like for me, as I'm breaking these down in my little workbook here, I have home and groceries, entertainment, car. And then I keep track of the income and outgoing expenses for each business, because I have 3 businesses, which is less people, more than most people do. But the thing is here is that where somebody, I don't remember exactly how it came up, but that it's like then how you see it. And Lucy mentions a pie chart, right? And so like if you're a visual person, make this an art project. Like make it something that you can look forward to, and that you can create something so that you can visibly see these things that you're keeping track of. And someone mentioned that they have a hard time being consistent. So do I, which is why I pay for everything with cards. And then I sit down and do my assessment at the end of the month, because I also have vague ADHD tendencies, and doing that every single day was just not practical. But if I stuff my cash receipts in the box, in the whatever this is, book, what is this book, what are objects? If I stuff all the cash receipts in here and everything else goes through the card, then I don't have to be mentally keeping track of things.
Okay, but and again, that's something you have to make the commitment, and then again, decide what will really work for you, because keeping everything together for a month, if that works for Callie, that's terrific. That might be too much for somebody, and then the idea that you're compiling everything, and that once a month you have to go through this, stack, whether the stack is like this or the stack is like this. If it feels threatening, don't do it. Make the decision to say, okay, I know it's going to be hard, but I'm going to do it once a week or every other every other day. We were talking about something. Oh, I know there's some apps that when you buy, I don't know if that's Mint, they round up and round down for you.
That's Capital. I'll drop the name in.
Yeah, Capital. So, I mean, that is, they're rounding up for you and putting the extra pennies in a little savings account for yourself. So that would make your bookkeeping, and again, bookkeeping, nasty word, the only word I think that has 2 O's, 2 K's, and 2 E's in a row. It's just, again, all it means is keeping track. So if you go with something like that, it'll round up, it'll make the addition and the bookkeeping a little easier, and then you'll get a couple of extra pennies here and there.
Yeah, and actually my friend has an affiliate link for that, and so I did just drop the name into the chat box, but I'll get that affiliate link, and I think that both people get something special if you get some money or something. So I'll share that with everybody. So don't run out and sign up for it yet. Let me share that person's link with you. One thing that Camilla has mentioned is having 2 cards. Now, obviously, bank accounts and dealing with bank accounts and requirements for bank accounts, there's a spectrum of privilege that you may or may not have to get those things set up, right? But if you're able to get different bank accounts, one for your work and business costs and one for your personal stuff, again, for me, that's like a filter of organization.
But let's talk about that for just a second. So bank account, so more than one bank account, more than one credit card. First, see what kind of fees are attached. If you're the kind of person that can pay off your cards every month, great. If not, the more cards you have, the more debt you're incurring. And so,
well, let me reframe them, because so Camilla mentioned credit cards. I actually, I don't have any credit cards. I had my mom co-signed a credit card for me. We were a fairly middle-class family, and so I got like a $7,000 limit. I spent $7,000 at 18 years old in like a year. My mom helped me pay it off, and then I've never signed up for another credit card since then. And so I actually have no credit, not even bad credit, but no credit. So credit cards, Vivian is 100% right. Anything having to do with credit cards, you need to figure out all of those, the fees and those kinds of things. But what I'm talking about even is just simply a bank account. So what I use, I have a debit card that, the MasterCard debit card, so that you can use it as a credit card, but it's not actually a credit card, right? And so even that is a huge step towards categorizing and quarantining your work expenses off from your personal expenses.
But the other thing I was going to say, it also really depends on how you're categorizing yourself and your work. So you don't necessarily, just as Kelly and I have talked behind the scenes a little bit about how people are classifying themselves independent contractors, or just or looking to set up individual corporations. If you are just an independent contractor, then actually I would say you probably don't necessarily need 2 bank accounts to keep track of business, because everything you do is business related.
I think my accountant would probably at least have some concern about that framing. But one of the additional benefits is that when you have a business, you have a business name. And so for a lot of mainstream business people, not having that additional layer of protection may not actually matter, right? So then you don't have to have an LLC, or you don't have to have any sort of business structure. But with sex workers, and that was for me, when I did my first businesses, even though they were the incorrect structures to start with, the main reason I did it was having an extra layer of protection. And so I do want to talk a little bit about that. And to have that sort of was to have the protection. And also just because, I mean, at the time, like, I didn't start my own, I don't think I had, no, that's not true. I had a bank account when I was just a pro dom, like a separate bank account. But then I did a different corporation structure when I created Kink Academy, because my intention with Kink Academy was to be a multi-million-dollar company. So again, so for me, those were the 2 needs that I did need some kind of a structure. If you are either not as concerned with privacy, I suppose there are some sex workers that are out and don't have that same level of concern, you may or may not need to. So just kind of, what are your thoughts in terms of the privacy aspect of having a business structure?
Was that a question?
To you.
Well, so in preparation for this discussion, I mean, I was doing a little background research, and I'll send links out later. So the whole LLC versus the corporation thing, again, is really about, the difference is related to privacy and taxes. So the LLC is a measure of privacy that you get. It's not a tax issue. The corporation, C-corp, S-corp, those are tax issues. So again, I would say it really varies on how, do you have another job? Is this your only job? Do you have a business name and a business tax ID number separate from your social security number? Or are you doing everything under your social security number? I mean, that's really, first you have to look at that. How are you doing it now, and what isn't working, or what do you want to do differently? So I don't know if we want to take questions about that, but that has to be really the first step before you start even thinking about, okay, so I want privacy, so I should have an LLC, or this, that, and the other thing. Again, the LLC is a measure of privacy and setting yourself up so that other people are running what you're doing. The corporate stuff, the C-corp, S-corp, all of that, that's how taxes are handled. And it's a decision to be made in terms of how you want to pay yourself and how much taxes you want to pay. And that's, again, we can talk about that, but it's a little bit more complicated. So first, are you doing everything under your social security number, or do you have a separate tax ID number? And what are you doing now, and what works and what's not working?
Okay, so let's do this as like an actual, let's see, I wonder if I can figure out how to do a poll. Oh, and I just remembered to check the ask a question box, so I will check that. Okay, so I'm not going to fuss with the poll. Just put in the comments. Do you have an LLC, an S-corp, or a C-corp? Have you just been filing under your own social security number and having payment stuff like Night Flirt and stuff come through your own social security number. So Camilla is saying that you have an LLC and that it's attached to your real name. That when you gave, so yeah, the LLC, that they give them the legal name and the address, but depending on where you incorporate, that information may or may not be available to the public. That's the difference, is that you have to give them information. Like, I can't just start a business and file with the government and just be like, but it's run by no one. You know, that sadly doesn't work. Okay, so Jen is a sole proprietor. Lyra has LLC with a registered agent. Absolutely, yeah. Having a registered agent, there's usually lawyers or accountants, those kinds of people that you can hire to have as a registered agent, and I would highly recommend that you do that. One of the things that has come up fairly frequently is like, whose name do you put on there, right? And so I have had one of my submissives as on all of my paperwork for 13 years. Now, generally speaking, I do not recommend that structure because, as we all know, submissives, even really solid ones that we just don't know what potentially could happen in their lives or our relationship, right? And so having someone who is a professional who you pay is one of those costs that is well worth the money. And so, Lucy, that you have been a sole proprietor, but now you're registering for that you registered as an LLC. California keeps records with the Secretary of State. Yep. That it feels more legitimate. Definitely. That Camilla, you have an LLC and an S-corp.
So I noticed, I know I promised I wouldn't look at the comments, and I can't really see them that well, but that I noticed from Mistress Camilla that how to take advantage of the S-corp part. So it's about filing with the IRS. And so one of the links we'll send out towards the end will give you the instructions of which tax form that you need to file. And again, the C-corp and the S-corp, so when you incorporate, right, when you get an EIN number, a tax ID, and you incorporate, everything starts off as a C-corp. And then you can translate that over to an S-corp. And this is stuff, like I said, I was just doing some research to get the exact language down. And the S-corp gets you a better tax advantage. So I'll send the link, and I'll send, we'll have the form. I know Callie had suggested, check on Kink-aware professionals to see if there's any accountants that might help you do some fee-for-service stuff. But it's an issue of how much taxes you're going to pay, C-corp versus S-corp.
Yeah. So let's actually, I'm going to drop this link in the box right now with the NCSF, the National Coalition of Sexual Freedom, has a really amazing resource called the Kink-aware Professionals List. I just included the link in the chat box that has everybody from accountants to real estate agents to website developers to therapists who are all who have to register and acknowledge that they understand kink and that they don't pathologize kink and those kinds of things. And so you can find an astounding array of professionals. Again, it depends on the state and the area you're in and that sort of a thing, but that can be a fantastic place to find people that are not going to be, you're going to avoid this layer of judgment, right? There was also, isn't there one of those big tax companies that is actually super friendly, like TurboTax? I feel like, is it TurboTax? Which one of those big companies is friendly to sex workers? I should have found that out.
So I don't know specifically about TurboTax being friendly to sex.
No, yeah, it's H&R.
H&R. So, but I will say that TurboTax is actually incredibly easy to use. But again, we're talking, it comes down to, it starts with, are you doing it under your own social? Are you doing it under a tax ID? But TurboTax in general is certainly super easy to use. The other thing I was just going to say about the Kink-aware professionals, I know our audience is from all over, but if you're not finding anything on Kink-aware professionals, I'm sure if you hit up Callie, who can then hit up me, if we know people in your area to, give you referrals, we can work on that.
Yeah. So Lucy's asking a question about that. Now that you have an LLC, should you hire an accountant?
So not necessarily. Now it comes down to how much money are we talking about? So is it $10,000? Is it $100,000? Is it $1 million? And we don't have to get specific, of course, but not necessarily. Not necessarily.
So I think that like what Vivian is saying is that logistically speaking, it's not, you don't have to get an accountant if you're able to manage those things and kind of keep track of that stuff. And depending on how much money, right? Because the bottom line is that if you're filing taxes on $15,000, it doesn't make sense to pay an accountant $1,500 to do your taxes, because that's not necessarily going, like that's just not a ratio in your favor. I suck at numbers, and even I know that.
And I would say I was just checking something on this link that I'm going to send out to you guys. One advantage of the LLC is that there's less record keeping and less forms and less accounting that you have to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, before you start spending tons of money on accountants, look at, what's the dollar range that we're talking about? How much business is it?
Okay, so then let's talk for a minute about then what are some things that you can concretely look at when trying to figure that out, right? And so let's say you're sitting down and trying to decide whether or not you should hire an accountant. Some things that you should look at are, A, how much money do you have coming in and going out in broad numbers, right? Is it less than $20,000? Then maybe some of these automated services or those kinds of things might be good. If you're starting to get into the, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, maybe so. So that's one thing that you can look at. The other thing that you can look at, though, is, are you going to do it? And that was for me that was far and away the biggest factor in when I decided to hire an accountant, is that I looked at my track record of not doing it. And for me, the loss, the cost of not hiring an accountant, and then therefore not filing my taxes and having the logistic stress of that. But for nearly a decade, I had the psychological shame, knowing that this was getting worse and worse and worse, and I just wasn't dealing with it. And so for me, that is also an additional factor, is that if I'm making $15,000, but I am literally not going to file my taxes unless I get help, then you look for help that's appropriate to your budget. And I think that that's like that Vivian's talking from the logistics side, and I just want to make space for the emotional reasoning to hire someone as well, right?
Yeah, sure.
And yeah, Gia, we live in a post 50 Shades world. And so Gia mentioned that she went in and just said, I'm a dominatrix. Do you do taxes? And that they made you feel like a normal person. And while obviously there are vast swaths of the United States where that isn't true, people have more of an understanding about DOMs and strippers' existence than they did even 5 years ago.
But I would also say, even if you're in a swath of the country that might not be as friendly, I mean, taxes, all of the stuff is all electronic now. You don't have to go physically meet with anybody. So if you are in a more rural area, find somebody in the big city, because everything you do, I mean, just send it electronically. They can, the IRS is the IRS. It doesn't discriminate against small towns or big towns. So, yeah, I mean, all of this is done online at this point. You don't have to physically talk to anybody.
And another thing to keep in mind is could your accountant save you money? I mean, my accountant, she understands about write-offs. She can look at something and say, oh no, that was actually a business expense. And so she made it so that I actually got money back in 2 of the years that I didn't pay taxes.
Mhm.
And so paying her to do those things, right? And so Red Plastic is talking about what's the cost of you doing it versus what's the cost of you paying, right? And like, what are things that you can write off and those kinds of things. And so,
Mhm.
and yeah, and so again, so we talked a little bit about what business structures you have, but what are you saying you do, right? Because, you know, some of us put consultant, some of us put entertainer. For a little while, I put entertainer, and my account at that time then was like, awesome, then all of your sex toys are a write-off. All of
Right. And I was just looking at Goddess Fustine's note about she hires a CPA, she's an entertainer, doesn't have an LLC or an S-corp. Yeah, I mean, being an individual under your own social security number is not that complicated. And there's a ton of stuff which is why I was saying originally, I mean, at least get yourself to keep track of everything first before you start splitting it out. Just get yourself in the mindset that you're going to, at least for a short period of time, have to write everything down.
Right.
We'll keep coming back to that. Write it all down.
Because this is the getting started session. And so you literally can't do any of the other things that we would like to talk about in our discussions without knowing what is happening in your money, right? And so I think of the keeping track system as being in 3 categories. So you have your business expenses, things like saving for taxes, paying for marketing, your advertisements, your website hosting and development, tech, things like new cameras or laptops, those kinds of things, right? So those are business, your phone, right? Yeah, so your business categories. Then there are what I think of as sex worker categories, whether we label them as that in our taxes probably, but these are things like clothes, makeup and hair, toys, and environmental things that you need, nails, tanning, waxes, right? And then you have your life, rent, all the different insurances, car, utilities, entertainment, food, health, those kinds of things. Is that if you even just start with those broad categories and then pick like 5 subcategories, even if you start with that, you can continue to add more in as you get more comfortable with it, right? And Faustine, I don't know if you are able to share the CPA that you work with or not, but you know, I'm definitely going to start a post in the Patreon that says if you do work with someone who is friendly to sex workers, drop their information here so that folks can reach out to, you know, to have a warm lead is never a bad idea, right? Okay, so what are you guys saying that you are? I see that, so Faustine wrote as an entertainer. Ophelia is an entertainer and a model and a dog walker. Excellent. Model, actor, entertainer. Yep. I've been a consultant, a speaker, an author, entertainer. My very first dungeon, it was in like a fairly nice neighborhood in Boston. And I told my landlord that I was a yoga instructor that specifically targeted middle to upper class businessmen, because watching my ass in yoga pants was the thing that inspired them to keep booking sessions. And the guy was like, "You're a genius." So I was a yoga instructor for a year. Okay, so entertainer is definitely going to be one of the more, he's idiosyncratic. Okay, so we won't recommend him, but suffice to say that it does matter when you can fire somebody. Writer, life coach, yeah, coach is so sufficiently vague as a category still. It's like the Wild West. Artist, fantastic. Okay, so yeah, go ahead, Vivian.
Oh, well, so I was going to say, so you and I talked about this the other week. I believe me, I'm not minimizing, you know, the idea or fear of being audited as trivial. I know people that have been. Actually, I think I got a letter from the IRS one year. It's just, practically speaking, it does not happen very often. And so one of the things I wanted to talk a little bit about that, but it would be, I remember Kelly and I said we wanted to put the question out: has anybody been audited? Has anybody gotten an IRS letter?
Yeah, someone very early in the conversation said something like that they came after you and got what they wanted. Who had put that comment? No, so that's good. Only for vanilla jobs.
Certainly, I mean, we all have hope for the next administration. But there's so many other things to go after. And this is what I said to Callie, and Callie disputed it. But again, we're not also depending on dollar threshold. If it's, you know, I don't know, under 100,000. I mean, again, there's so many other things. The IRS is understaffed, undersupported.
That it just simply, yeah, I have a friend who's an accountant for the IRS, and he has talked about for the last 4 years, basically, or nearly 4 years, about how understaffed and under-resourced they are and how they're basically just constantly scrambling, right? And obviously, while it's not a good idea to bank on that and so therefore not do anything, right? That's not the mindset, but the idea that probably shouldn't be your paramount concern.
Right. But having said that, again, you know, with all due respect to our respective political views, filing is the biggest thing. So file, you know, don't skip filing. Get your quarterlies in, get your annual stuff in. I mean, file. If you're filing, the chance of getting audited go down even further.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds like an awful experience getting that big ass envelope, Lyra. It's like, here's my $2. Now you owe me $40 for emotional trauma. Goodness to contest in court, right? So I want to kind of come back to some of the questions that had come in, because the fear of getting audited and getting in trouble for the type of work that you do was something that came up because laws do change all the time. And so I think that's part of what Vivian is talking about here, is that, like, as long as you're not doing big, blatant, fraudulent things, as long as you haven't, you know, surpassed probably the 6-figure amount, and as long as you're doing your best to file as regularly and on time as you possibly can, those are going to be things that are going to then mitigate even the lower risk that we're talking about of potentially being audited, right? And so just a couple, and I didn't make note. My fucking mouse stopped working today, and my keyboard isn't working, and so so I didn't keep track of who made all of these questions. But one of the things was that the fear that you've set up with the wrong account types. And so, Vivian, is there a way that you can just kind of, like, nutshell version what we should be thinking about in terms of doing that? If we do want to do an LLC or an S-corp, why would we do, in 1 to 2 sentences, would we do either of any of those?
So again, we're looking at apples and oranges, and I'm not sending the links out until we're done, just because I know Callie, God forbid you don't get Callie's full attention. The LLC is about protection. So do you want yes, of course, especially in this post 9/11 era, I mean, your name does show up eventually, but an LLC protects you. You have a registered agent. If you go bankrupt, you're not liable. I mean, those are the big things. So if those are concerns to you, then set up an LLC. That has nothing really to do with setting up the C-corp or the S-corp. An LLC automatically is set up as a C-corp. So you, as an individual, you are either your own person filing under your own, and again, this is all the tax stuff. You're either your own person filing under your own social security number as an individual, or you are first a C-corp, and then you can, as a C-corp, you can become an S-corp, which I'm going to send the links. And the difference between the two are about taxes and how much is paid to yourself as a salary versus how much is the business getting. So that's where the accountant stuff gets into. So do you care about, well, not that you don't all care, but is it a privacy, like get yourself removed first, then do the LLC. If that's less of an issue, then don't bother at this point, and then it's just the issue of the taxes.
And yes, Faustine, so you can file anonymously, well, like anonymously to the public. You have to still file information, but Delaware does. It's one of the main reasons why Delaware is so popular. Is because there's this additional layer of public privacy protections, right?
Absolutely. Yes. Like, I don't know, like tens of thousands of new corporations, new LLCs are set up in Delaware every day, every month, every year. It's like the Cayman Islands, you know, it's,
and then another question that came up is, this is slightly different than what we're talking about, but of how much to invest in your business, that you keep buying new latex and you don't know where to draw the line. So that can be a problem. Yeah, Vivian, you have a thought?
Well, I was going to say that's more in your realm, but I mean, I would say, you know, are the people that are your clients, are you seeing are you wearing the same latex for each client? And has enough time passed? Are they going to remember which latex outfit you were in?
No, Vivian, you know, you have definitely not been affected, or the level of obsession that is centered around this thing. But, you know, I'm going to make a note. I would like to do, I think I might just do a Q&A thing that is heavily focused on the Q&A side, on the sex worker side of things, because that we can talk a little bit more then about like gifts. How do you kind of keep track of gifts, and how do you categorize gifts?
Well, so you mentioned that earlier, and I wanted to go back to that. And you're right, I have not actually been a sex worker, but I've played one on TV. So tell me why you're differentiating between gifts. Why are you doing that? Why isn't it just money in?
For psychological purposes, because and I would love, okay, so this is like Eva says, gifts are not taxable, and so on the one hand, if something is a gift, then it doesn't count as income. In the same way, up to a certain point, obviously.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I mean, since we're talking about basic budgeting, right? Yeah. And we're talking with people that have self-identified as having difficulty with numbers and math and money. Before you start talking about gifts not being taxable and taxes, when we're talking about basic budgeting,
that's a good point.
You know, it's money in, whether it's being recorded somewhere or it's a gift. It's money in. You've got to keep track of it.
And so when it's money, yes. If somebody, Faye, that's exactly it. So if somebody just gives me $100 and it's not tribute for something, they literally just send me money, because Lord knows that happens, right? That still needs to count as income for you, the sex worker, right? That's not different. I think the part that then sometimes get confusing is, well, what happens if someone gives me a $900 pair of Louboutins? That's not income. And so do you need to track that or not? I think then becomes a personal preference.
Well, but again, so now we're talking about IRS stuff and taxes. I'm talking about if in order to really have a handle on your own money, and how much you need to live and what you need to do to, like, I mean, you know, we all should be having an IRA and a retirement fund. in order to get a handle on what you're spending and how much you need to live and how much you can save, certainly the gifts of shoes are not related unless you plan on selling them. But gifts, financial gifts, count it towards your income as your count it as money in your pocket for the time period that you're keeping track.
Yeah. So money is income, no matter what the contextual framing around that money might be. And I would encourage you to keep track of non-monetary gifts for a month or two, just also so you can see what's coming in from that perspective, right? Because I'll be honest, it's like I heard for 20 years the old saying, you don't want to be a retired dominatrix with 40,000 pairs of shoes and no money in the bank, right? And so if you notice that you're getting a ton of gifts, of physical gifts, but your income isn't really matching up to where you want it to be, then that's where you want to take a look at how can you change some of those things, right? And that may or may not, that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with budgeting and what we're talking about in this session. But that's then something that you can go back to your superstar branding that we've talked about, to your ideal client profile that we've talked about, and say, how do you shift from clients who want to buy you shitty Aldo's shoes to clients who want to either give you money or invest in your dreams or just simply book more sessions, right? And so it's worth keeping track of for a few months, because what you don't track, you don't understand.
I also wanted to go back. There was a note a while back about pie charts. So pie charts are great. They're also pretty easy to do in Excel, but don't, again, going back to the whole psychological barrier thing. Yes, eventually you can do a pie chart. It's not that hard, but don't overcomplicate your thinking, to prevent you from starting this tracking. Step one, the very first thing. You'll get to pie charts. For the moment, just keep track. Keep track.
And I'm working right now on some worksheets that will eventually be part of the Prodom playbook, but that are basically budgeting and tracking sheets. They're going to be analog sheets that you can, print out or fill out digitally. But I'm working on some of those things to give you guys a structure that makes sense within our industry, but then also has room for all of these more traditional things that we're doing, right? And a couple of things that I want to note out loud, and there's been some really great comments and suggestions and stuff in the chat box that I didn't call out here. And so when I post the recording in Patreon, you should be able to also see the comments. And I would recommend going back through and reading some of the additional stuff I didn't shout out. But that Jen is saying that she had a client who worked for the IRS who said that if you're a business owner and the gift is from a client, then it's still taxable. And that makes sense to me, because they would want to close those juicy loopholes. Probably. And Gia, this experience you're talking about in terms of spending, constantly being like, oh, it's a write-off, or, oh, there's always just a reason, or those kinds of things, is again, one of my tendencies as well. And while I certainly am not perfect, I'm far, far from it. Even just some of these things that we're talking about that Vivian is saying in terms of keeping track, categorizing, and then in my case, getting an accountant to help me with get beyond what my learning disability prevents me from doing, though that's going to create such a foundation so that as you get better with money, that you can stack those skills, right? And so that's why Vivian keeps coming back to keep track of it, is because literally none of the other stuff matters if you're not keeping track of this stuff, right? And so so look for a worksheet coming out hopefully in the next week, maybe 2 at the max, to help you guys keep track of that. Okay, let's see here. So okay. So the comment about that you're afraid of having your bank account shut down because of payments from adult sites, and that's something I'm not sure, Vivian, if you can necessarily speak to. Yeah, it's okay. because it's a problem and it's an ongoing problem. And unfortunately, there is no perfect solution to it because banks are notoriously fickle. They can seem fine. And then, as we all know, we all know somebody who got their account frozen, those kinds of things. A couple of notes that I think I've mentioned in previous Q&As, but if you have money in Night Flirt, if you have money in Venmo or PayPal or Sext Panther or any of these accounts, you need to be pulling them immediately out of those company accounts into your own bank account, because that's one less company who can freeze your account and keep your fucking money. And so I know that it's like a flex to do on social media now, to be like, look at how much money is in my Amazon account, like look at how much money is in my PayPal. Fuck that flex. Flex with the money in your account, not with that, because the moment they freeze it, you're not flexing quite so sharp as you thought you were.
Has that happened, Kelly?
100%. Amazon does it. PayPal does it. Multiple other companies do it. Is that if they just decide that you are going against their terms of service, which are frequently vague and used sporadically, then they'll just freeze your money and they'll just keep your money. Yeah, see, Amazon took $600 of gift cards. Amazon kept $2,000. Yeah, they don't give a shit. They love, all of these companies love sex workers' money until they decide that they just want to keep it without the people attached to it.
I hate Amazon.
Yeah. I hate corporates. I hate corporate structures that don't see sex work as a valid form of work, because and so I know that that's probably not a very optimistic or helpful answer. But the point is that you should, when it comes to making a bank account, try to stay away from ones that have been blatantly bad with sex workers. So like Wells Fargo and Chase Bank are both notoriously shitty around sex workers. And just constantly be asking friends and putting feelers out to see, to keep your ear to the ground to see if other banks are starting to be problematic or are openly friendly to our kind. Yeah, because once they take your money, you're not ever getting it back. I lost hundreds of dollars to PayPal multiple times. Mm-hmm. And so in terms of banks that are blatantly bad for sex workers, Jen, what I just mentioned was Wells Fargo and Chase are both like blatant, and lots of sex workers have had problems with them before. I use Santander Bank. I still use my Boston bank. Actually, Vivian, I've had my same bank account and UPS box for now going on almost 20 years. And they've, knock on wood, have never had a problem. Even when I made the stupid mistake of naming one of my company's Kinky Inspirations. So stupid.
Well, one of my favorite things to do was going to the B of A after a fetish fair flea market with, $40,000 in cash, and, sitting with them for hours counting it, and, New England Leather Alliance, they knew. I just noticed.
Dirty to me, Vivian. You're getting me all hot and bothered thinking about $40,000. Oh.
I just noticed Eva's comment, and I was going to say credit unions. I think again, probably depending on your area, but I would definitely try a credit union first.
Cool. And then just keep your eye on it. Try to use as generic names as possible, right? Like there's a reason my company now is named Balance Studios instead of Kinky Inspirations. And just keep an eye on it and don't get complacent, because the moment that you don't think your shit is at risk anymore is, possible it'll just perk right up at the worst time. And then how much of your percentage of your income should go towards your business? So I think that is right, exactly, Eva, because I'm still a yoga teacher. So if you're pulling in, let's say you're pulling in $2,000 a month between sessions and phone service and tributes and that kind of stuff, right? No, what?
Well, see, and you can't answer that question until you know how much money you need to live.
Okay. So really, the tracking is before the deciding even.
Yeah, you have to, because think about it. You bring in $2,000 a month, let's say, so 24 grand a year, and you have done your list of expenses and your rent and your phone and your internet and your car payment or your bus voucher and your food. I mean, is $3,000 a month. So the answer is nothing can go to your business because you need it to survive. So it doesn't, the question is it's a fabulous question and it's a really good question, but you can't answer it until you know how much you need to live wherever you're living.
Yeah, no, that's legit. And I think that, and also just as a general philosophy though, I know for myself and a lot of other entrepreneurs, whether in the sex industry or outside of the sex industry, we might be more free spenders about our business, right? Kind of what that comment earlier is like, oh, fuck it, it's a write-off, like, right? Like, oh, I'm going to go out to dinner with my girlfriends and we're going to talk about business and that's going to make it a write-off. And that kind of a mentality about investing in your business and those kinds of things, we just may not be as tight-fisted, right? Is that it's like, if I even think I need something for my business, I'm clicking that pay now button much faster than if I just personally want a new pair of sneakers or like whatever, right?
But again, forget the new pair of sneakers for yourself. I mean, you can click the pay now button a million times, but clicking it while you're living on the street is not helpful.
Or that you're not meeting your, no, but that's my point, it's my point that I didn't get to, is that that I didn't actually finish making, is the idea that because you're so free because it's so easy to be free with our business expenses, it's that much more important to keep track of them for a little while so that you can see where is that impulse happening, right? Like I will spend a ton of money on content, but I won't spend as much money hiring a VA because I can do it my damn self. That's a psychological reasoning rather than a logistical reasoning. And so this is I should have, rather than said getting started, I just should have said, keep track of your shit session.
What's a VA?
A virtual assistant. And so like somebody who's going to help me schedule social media posts or follow up on customer service or those kinds of things, right? And again, the fact that I actually run 3 businesses means that a VA would actually be an incredibly valuable use of my money. But I need to both look at what's the actual spending, and then if I can check and see if there's any insights into my own thoughts about money and value and those kinds of things that I can only glean when I see where my money is going. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And earlier somebody said Mackenzie Phoenix has a great bookkeeping for sex worker classes. And so I'm not familiar with them, but thank you for that recommendation, because that's fantastic. And so a couple of these suggestions about having multiple bank accounts, that might be a way that you manage both the reality and then the anxiety and the fears that are rooted in reality, but then may get overblown because we just like chew on them, right? Okay, to operate on slim margins where you're spending 25% or less on your business, and also impulse shopping. Yeah, I'm an impulse shopper. That's definitely my vice. And at the start of this year, I started a no spend season where I put a lot of much stricter restrictions on myself. It's kind of all gone to shit since the pandemic, and I've bought 76 plants. I basically have a fucking farm in my backyard. But, again, when you keep track of where those monies are, you can go, okay, late night is an impulse shopping thing. Maybe it's worth investing the 20 or 40 bucks a year for a site like freedom.io, where you can actually block certain URLs during certain times of the day. And so like for me, when I was writing Ditch the Bitch Stigma, I had to block Twitter for 6 hours a day where you can't access the website from your laptop. And so I would recommend that if impulse shopping, like especially now online shopping, I don't even have to get out my credit card. I just hit that buy now button and 5 days later, I'm like, oh shit, I guess I ordered something, right? And so, yeah, go ahead, jump in.
Well, I was just going to say, you know, again, we started on this note. We can, you know, wrap up on this note. It's all about psychology. It's all about what's pushing us to do things. And the first important thing is to really, you know, have some self-awareness, as I'm sure most of everybody on this chat has. Why are we doing these things? I noticed some comments about the dopamine. You know, that's real. Those dopamine highs are real. This doesn't work for everybody, but for some people, again, I recommend if you have to do something that you don't like keeping track, if you know it's not going to be forever, it might be easier. So you set yourself up to do it for a month, and then maybe you can stop, or maybe you'll love it. For shopping and for other stuff, I make the analogy to smoking. I had to quit smoking. For me, I know one day if I really want a cigarette, I can have a cigarette, but today I'm not going to do it. For shopping, you know, if somebody really wants to shop, maybe instead of shopping every night, you can say, okay, I'm not going to shop for a week, but I'm going to shop once a week, or I'm going to shop once a month. You know, try to figure out what's going to work for your own brain chemistry.
Yeah. And the follow-up to that is then do your best not to shame yourself when you don't do it right? Like I was gonna stop the garden spending a week ago. I have just added 2 more eggplants. And so I am giving myself a deadline that it's like, and I'm running out of space. So that's one thing. And one thing that I have also started incorporating is an accountability buddy specifically for money. And by accountability, I say accountability, but I actually mean permission. Now, this can be a fucking weird dynamic when you identify as a dominant. Like, I'm an actual dominant. I don't just play one on TV. And so I don't fucking like asking anyone for permission. But I have a friend, and one of the systems that I have set up for myself, where especially if something is a little bit spendier, so if it's under 20 bucks and I want it, I buy it. If it's 50 bucks and above, I have to wait 24 hours. Like I've set myself some parameters. I have to wait 24 hours, so I can't impulse shop. I can't impulse buy. And then I have to actually talk to my friend and say, I'm going to explain why I think that I need this. And then I want you to tell me if that seems reasonable. Now, obviously, they don't control me. They're not my dominant. They're not actually giving me permission. But sometimes the mere act of explaining why I want something, I have to actually acknowledge that I want it just to want it. And that is less appealing to me. And so having those kinds of buffers, timed buffers, because like Vivian is saying, right, I don't have to hold my willpower for a whole month. I have to hold it for 24 hours and long enough to get my friend on the phone. And that's the way then that I don't buy things that I don't actually need.
I was just looking at the questions.
Yeah, and thank you for the ask a question box.
The first one in particular struck me. Let me just read it one more time. Pay all my expenses and transfer the rest to my personal checking, or should I try and stick to a salary? So I think that it's better to try to stick to a salary that you, because again, it's another line item that you can control, and anything over that is savings. So rather than just leaving the faucet drip, permanently, set an amount, fill that up, and then leave whatever's left in that account.
And also, I want to recommend a resource. There's a book called Profit First. I can't think of the I can't think of the author, but the book name is Profit First, and it's a absolute iconic book in the mainstream world, and it talks a lot about how to structure your payment so that some of those, do I pay myself first or that? Profit First, yeah, exactly. I'm pretty sure that that's it. Please tell your email to send questions.
The U.S. question, double taxation, I'm not even going to go close to because I don't want to give anybody the wrong direction. But there was, the overlap with the artist and the doming. I think it depends. That's a good question for whoever your registered agent is. I would think that if that it, it's just one LLC and you can have whatever you're calling yourself, multiple functions. So you're functioning as a dom, you're functioning as an artist. So it's use the one LLC for both. But that's a cautioned answer from me.
Yeah, and Jaguar, I know that the international thing is the international thing. The international concerns about taxes that you've brought them up, and I'm looking for someone who has specific knowledge around international taxes, because, like Vivian said, it's like if you're not familiar with that, we don't want to give you the wrong information. So it is on my list, though, Jaguar. I am working on it. Okay, so hopefully I can find somebody that can help us out with that. What about anxiety with paying credit card versus having money in the bank?
Well, so, that really depends on what the interest rate on the card is. If the interest rate on the card is 0, obviously that's not an issue. If you can, so many card companies, again, assuming, like Callie said earlier, you're able to get the credit cards in the first place, you have your credit's okay. So many places have, free, no interest for a period of time for, rollover balances. So you can keep playing that cycle of rolling one to another every year. And then it's free money. There's definitely something to be said to having some money in the bank. And if psychologically it like you said, the anxiety, if it feels a little bit better, then it's a balance. And I would say definitely keep some in the bank. Unless the interest rate is really exorbitant. And sometimes interest rate are, 15, 20%. And it's not worth it. There's no way. I mean, you're just basically paying other people for stuff that you shouldn't.
Yeah. And there is different thoughts about the whole, do you pay the credit card first? And everything that I've seen talks about the interest level being kind of the defining feature, is that if it's a high interest level, then no, you want to clear that fucker out as fast as humanly possible. But there is that psychological element of having real money to access, not credit card money. That if an emergency happens, you having credit card space is not the same thing as knowing that you have $300 to buy a new set of tires or whatever.
Right, and that also has to be in your own head, with the understanding that just because you have that emergency money in the bank, it is emergency money and you're not going to go spend it.
Yeah.
So, and guess what that goes back to? Tracking.
Right. And also that app, Capital, that I mentioned earlier, it pulls it out of your bank account into a hidden bank account. And so you don't even see it, which I think is absolutely amazing. And so you can set it up and you can have multiple accounts in this Capital app, where you can say once a week, pull out $20 and put it in my tax fund. Once a week, pull out $20 into my travel fund. And it just does it automatically, which I think is magic. So I'm definitely going to get that link to share with you guys. Lyra, you ask about that. You say that most of your income is from doming, but that you're also an artist and that there's some overlap. Do you need to keep it separate?
So I answered that. I said that.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that.
I said that that it's a specific question, I would say, for the registered agent. But in my mind, the way I would look at it is the doming and the being an artist are just two functions of the same company, and so it's one. Yeah. There's no need to do separate. It's it's one.
Like for me, the reason that I have multiple companies is specifically because I have very different businesses. And so like I started Feminist Events LLC when I started doing mainstream events and hackathons and books and stuff because I did want a separate sort of entity that mainstream companies could interact with that was not connected at all to the kink stuff. And then I also had the separate factor that if anything did happen with the kink stuff, I didn't want that to be attached to or to impact my mainstream income. But those are two very diverse businesses. Whereas I think I mentioned earlier, and we're going to wrap up here in just a couple minutes because I know you have to go, Vivian, is that when I started and did the 3 companies that I got bad advice for, partially that was because I had a company for Kink Academy. I had a company for my dungeon, which was like completely wrong. And then I had another company for my pro dom work. Whereas now anything kink related, Princess Callie, coaching, Kink Academy is all under one business. And then anything mainstream related is all under another business. But if you don't have that kind of need for other people to not necessarily, like I didn't want mainstream people to be like, oh, this is actually a perv company, even though they knew I was a perv. So there's a lot of different dynamics right there, right? Okay, so I want to wrap up because Vivian has a hard limit at 1:30 and we respect hard limits here in the Red Key Club. And so for all of the other questions and comments and those kinds of things, I am going to go through them. I'm going to pull them out. Vivian's going to be joining us once a month for the gold tier. I'm going to talk, I just published it. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that and how to join us for future classes. But we're definitely going to be digging in even further into these questions. So whether we didn't get them to them today, or whether or not you have more questions that come up over the next few weeks, communicate with me, let me know, and we're going to do our best to keep addressing stuff as we go forward. Thank you, Vivian, so much.
It was beyond my pleasure. I just sent the 3 links. LegalZoom is actually very helpful. I had done some research, as I said. These are very easy to read, but I know Callie will continue to offer more resources. It, again, truly has been my pleasure.
Thank you, Vivian. Have a great rest of your day, Vivian. We'll be talking to you again in another few weeks. And thanks, everybody, for joining us. I'm really glad.
Thank you so much. It's so wonderful to see everybody. Thank you.
Yay, awesome. All right, y'all. So this video will be up on Patreon by the end of the day today. Thanks, Vivian. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Bye.
Bye, everyone.